Today we're going to talk about Caeleb Dressel's 100 fly at the 2018 NCAA Championships. But before we get into that, let's look at a little bit of the context. So, coming into that 2018 NCAA Championships, Caeleb Dressel, he had a lot of expectation, there's a lot of pressure in terms of what he was going to do. People were hoping, 2 years earlier, he had kind of gotten close to breaking that 18-second barrier in the 50 free. At his conference championship meet, just 3 weeks earlier than the championships, we saw him break the American record in the 200 IM, an event that traditionally he didn't really race rested, and so breaking that in maybe what wasn't his supposed to be his end of season meet was pretty incredible. He also broke the American record in the 100 breast, which, it kind of blew people away and opened people's eyes. We knew he was a great swimmer, but just how good and just how versatile he could actually be. And so there's a whole lot of pressure on him coming into these 2018 NCAA Championships, and on the first day of the meet, he stood up and said, "I'm ready, I'm here." He broke 18 seconds in the 50 free. Obviously swimming that 17.6, which we talked about a few weeks ago. A very, very incredible swim. So there's a lot of pressure, and people were kind of curious to see what he could do with the 100 fly. We knew he was a fantastic flyer. That was his main stroke, and so there's a lot of expectation on this race and what he could do. And in looking at his tempo, we can see it here. It's super consistent. He's obviously right where the goal of fly is, especially in a 100 race, is to get that tempo down to kind of 1.0 per cycle, and we can see he's holding on to that range, and he actually gets faster throughout his race. It's not a ton, only 4 to 5 100ths faster from that first 25 to that last 25, but he's actually increasing his tempo through the race, and that's something that's super incredible to watch. And really, it's kind of the same story with his stroke count, which we can see here, and he's super consistent. Obviously his first 25 is 4 strokes. He has that dive. He's a little bit more speed entering the water, and he's able to get to the wall in 4 strokes. He's also pushes it right about to a 15-meter breakout on his dive. He's a little shorter on all the other strokes, but then he holds 5 strokes for the last 3 25s, and he's really the only person in the race that does that. We see some other guys in the field get out in 4 strokes in that first 25, or maybe even come back in 5 strokes in that second 25, but no one is coming home on their last 25 in 5 strokes. I think second place came home in 6 strokes, and most of the guys we saw were coming home between 6, 7, and then there's even a couple finishing in 8 strokes on the last 25. And so that made a huge difference. His ability to be consistent, his ability to, essentially have a world-class 25 and do it 4 times in a row, was huge. We did that in both his tempo and in his stroke count. And as we know, right, those play off each other. Those work together, and that's ultimately a big part of our time and speed and what we're doing throughout a race. He's obviously got a phenomenal dive. We can see that by the way he dives into the water and is ahead. Almost immediately he's ahead after the dive. He's got a little bit of lead at that first breakout, and he spends 4.3 seconds underwater in his first 25. That's with underwater dolphin kick to 15. Again, carrying a lot of speed off that dive, and we're going to see, because he spends 4.8 seconds underwater off of the second wall, and then he spends about between 5.3 and 5.4 seconds off underwaters on his last 2 walls, and he's not going quite as far, but he's almost there. He doesn't break out any earlier than 13 meters at any point in the race, which is incredible. And that was a huge part of his race, was executing his turns, having good turns, getting off the wall pretty quickly. He's pretty consistent there. You know, we can see his turn times here, but but hammering those underwaters, being consistent, and making sure that that's playing into the rest of his race, right? Being able to be consistent on his underwaters, be fast on his underwaters, and comes up, make sure that he only needs to take 5 strokes on that last 25. So his dives, turns, and underwaters were a huge part of his race. And, you know, in a 25-yard pool, in a 100 fly with a great dolphin kicker, that's something that we're definitely going to see, is that dives, turns, and underwaters are going to make a big, big, big difference. And they did in the case for Caeleb Dressel's 100 fly here. And, you know, we can take a look at his splits here. It's incredible. Like, he's out fast, and we knew, you know, his goal was to kind of try and break 43. That was the goal that he set for himself before NCAA Champs. And you know, you have to be out fast, because you're going to have a fade in that race. You know, you're going to have a fade between that first 50 and that second 50. So to break 43 seconds, you know, you got to be out in 20 seconds or maybe a little bit faster, and he was. And then I really like the race because he certainly has enough speed to probably be faster than 19.9 and 50 fly. That's not an all-out 50 fly for him. And we can see that just by how consistent those back 325s are, right? 10.7, 11.4, 11.3. Very, very consistent. Like, he doesn't have a huge gap, and he's coming home faster on his last 25 than his third 25, which is not something we see often as well. But his third 25 also isn't super slow. And a big part of that last 25 being a little bit faster, and the thing that kind of blows me away about this race, is he actually doesn't breathe at all on his last 25. And so his last breath is a stroke before his turn. Pushes off. He underwater dolphin kicks to about 13 meters, and then breaks out and takes 5 strokes, no breath, and then touches the wall. Just absolutely incredible. And, you know, that's something that obviously he worked out with his coach, and they trained for it all season to be able to execute their last 25 like that. And what we can take away from this race, again, it's just, you know, it's going to be another great example of consistency, right? We see him very consistent in his stroke counts. We see him consistent in his tempos, in his turns, in his underwaters. Like, all of those things are consistent every single 25 throughout his race. And they fill out his race strategy to put together a great race. And, you know, clearly that consistency comes from practicing. It comes from racing and finding out what works and what doesn't work for him. And just putting in the work. I mean, consistency in practice makes consistency in 25s, and he's has a world-class swim and is a world-class swimmer because he's able to execute a race with that amount of consistency under the burden of expectation, under the burden of pressure, at the fastest short course yards meet in the country. He's able to put it all together and do something incredible, and that comes from, you know, not just practicing the physical stuff, not just practicing kicking out to 13, 15 meters every 25 at 100 fly, not just practicing holding your breath on the last 25 of 100 fly and seeing if that works for you, not just practicing dives, not just practicing turns, but it also comes from practicing kind of the mental piece, being able to show up to a meet where there's a lot of expectations, you know, from people outside of you, but also he had expectations for himself, right? He wanted to break 43, he wanted to break 18, he wanted to break 40 in the 100 free. All of those things were expectations that he had for himself. Be able to manage those personal expectations, the expectations from the people around him, and still, you know, not let that affect his performance, not let that affect how he raced. And that's a huge, huge piece of, I think, swimming success, is being able to manage, you know, what are your personal goals and expectations, and what are the goals and expectations that people around are holding for you, but knowing that at the end of the day, the moment that starter goes off, the only person that controls what happens in the race is you, and you need to make sure that you're going to do what you've practiced. So I really like that. And I think, you know, the other thing that we can take away is that last 25 where he does no breath in the 100 fly. And I'm not going to advocate that we all go no breath in our last 25 or 100 fly. But what it tells me is that him and his coach worked together and said, I think this is something that can make a difference in our race. And they worked on it and tried it. And, he actually didn't swim the 100 fly a lot, rested that season. And so we didn't get to see a lot of races where maybe he was practicing execution, but he certainly did practice that execution at some dual meets, at some mid-season meets where he was trying to figure out if that last 25 no breath was going to be, was it going to be a positive impact on his race? Because it can be a negative impact if you don't train for it, and you really just starve your body of oxygen for no reason other than thinking that maybe you're a little bit faster without the fly breath. Then it's going to have a negative impact. But he obviously worked it out with his coach to figure out that that works. It's faster for him. And so what I think that we can take away from that is, there's a lot of racing strategies. There's a lot of different pieces and parts to races that we learn about, that we implement, that generally are going to fit everybody. They're going to fit almost every swimmer, for the race they're looking at doing. But there are some things that you can do to individualize that racing strategy to make it suit you better, because not every racing strategy is going to suit every swimmer and in every style of race perfectly. And so being able to look at, take a race and say, what are the weaknesses of this race? Where do we think we could find improvement? And then work with your coach to experiment with that, to play with it, to figure out how you can get your best race. And that's all we're looking for at the end of the day. And so taking the general rules, taking the general racing strategies and guidelines, and then working with your coach to find a way to make them fit you as a swimmer better.